All right, welcome back. This is another episode of a podcast about names and other stuff. This is the second episode with my friend Christie. I'm not even going to try. Chung Lai. I'm sorry, Christie. My mouth. I do not have the skills to correctly pronounce your name in Chinese. But my friend Christie. Hopefully you listened to the last episode where you hear about her name and how she even learned what it means. But today we're going to learn more about other aspects of her life. We're going to learn about what it means for her, anyways, to be a religious convert. What it means to in the course of her marriage and her life, to this idea of growing together while growing individually as her relationship flourishes. And then also about something that I love about her is that she is indeed actively trying to be the person she is choosing to be, and hearing more about that and that walk for her, that journey for her. I really do encourage you to go back and listen to the last episode if you haven't, but I also invite you this time to come in and listen to this story of the names of my friend Christie, and hopefully as you listen again, you are encouraged in your own life. You are encouraged especially to go and talk to the people around you and to realize just how little you might know about the person sitting next to you. Explore the names of the people around you. Get to know them, because humans are amazing. I have never met a person I didn't find interesting. And the truth is, if you get to know the person next to you, you will see there's no such thing as an uninteresting human being. But let's continue learning about Christie, this particular interesting human being. Here we go. All right, so we're recording again. I'm here with my friend Christie, and I apologize, Christie, I cannot pronounce your Chinese name correctly. Say it for us again.
So the Chinese way to say it, the Mandarin pronunciation is Chun-Lai.
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 Close.
I'm close.
With the
all right.
tone. Yeah.
Okay. All
it's
right.
okay.
I'm trying. I will say I'm gonna quote somebody else that I've interviewed for the series. A friend of mine out here. Her name is Adalia, and she talks about how our names are the songs that our parents give us. And I think that's just a beautiful way of thinking of it, especially as you shared in the last episode the story behind your name and what it means, and when you found out what it means, and this beautiful song, this beautiful story that your parents gifted to you when you were born. So last time we talked about, you as your birth name. We talked about your chosen name that you chose for yourself when you became an American citizen. We've talked about your role as a mom, as a daughter. We didn't talk much about wife, but that's okay. I think your husband will be okay with that. What I want to actually talk about instead, so you're somebody who I know, and you're not the only person I know like this, but you are somebody I know who your story is that you right now do not have the same religion that you had when you were raised, correct?
Correct.
So I want you to talk about that. What is it? So a title we could say that you carry in addition to, being all these other things, or like refugee, you are a religious convert. So share with us that. Like, so what was your original religion that you were born with? What do you have now? What does it mean to you to convert? What are the struggles or joys you have in that? Like, share with us, please.
So I was raised Buddhist, but it was not really, my parents were not really practicing Buddhist, but it was like a lot of traditions that they grew up, that they passed on to us while growing up. Like we would have like the altars during like holidays, like the Lunar New Year, also the other, I want to say popular Chinese holidays, like I don't know how to say it in English. I forget what it's called. I want to say it's the sweeping tomb or tomb sweeping festival. I can only equate that to like Dia de los Muertos.
Yeah.
Kind of like a day of remembrance of our loved ones that have passed on. And so
and how do you say that in Mandarin? How do you say the name of that holiday?
Well, I don't even know if this is in Mandarin, because my parents, they also spoke Qiujiao, which is a dialect of Chinese, and so they call it Qingmeng. So I think it's in Mandarin is Qing. I don't know how to say it. Qingming. I can't even say it because I grew up saying it only in Qiujiao, and so that's how I know to say it.
Okay.
But it's Qingmeng. So it happens like once a year, and then that's when you go to the grave site or the wherever the tombstones are, and you clean it, and then you have an altar there, and then you just spend some time remembering your loved ones. And so, yeah, so growing up Buddhist, and then not really practicing much. We would go to the temples like maybe once a year during the Lunar New Year. Um, that was it. And then I met Robert, my husband, and then actually, let me back up. So I remember when we were living in Long Beach, there would be a bus that would come into the neighborhood, and they would bus us kids to a church. And so we used to go to this church, and I believe it was a Catholic church, because I do remember taking communion.
Okay.
I remember taking communion there one day, like when they bussed us over, like around Christmas time. And I remember listening to the song "Jesus Loves Me." So that was like my first exposure to Christianity or Catholicism. And so, yeah, so I just knew that was different, and that was not what I was taught at home. But then when I met Robert, and then he moved out here to California, then that was when I first started to go to SBC, our church in Santa Ana. And that was when I was like really immersed in the Christian culture, I guess you could say, of the church and how it was and what was going on. At first, I was going there with the attitude of like, okay, I'm going to see what this is all about. I'm going to learn about, because, there's like a lot of names and lessons and people in the Bible that, I really had no reference to, or, I didn't know who they were, what it was about and everything. So I treated it like a college course where I'm trying to learn like who these people are, what they went through, and like how God was, working in their lives. And then eventually, I think after I had Mia, which is like maybe 3 years in, that was when I really became more interested in seeking a relationship versus like just seeking the book knowledge of what Christianity was about. And I think it became clear for me when Mia started preschool at a Christian school, what I was missing in my life, what I was seeking was I found it in Jesus. So yeah.
So something that I've heard people say about conversion experience, and I don't know if this was something that you struggled with, was a sense of loss. I mean, sure, of course, you embrace your faith that you embrace because of what you gain from it. I mean, you and I'm trying to be somewhat neutral here because you and we share the same faith. We do. But I mean, just within general sense, people talk about that. Like, yeah, I grab onto my new faith, whatever it is I believe, because of the things I get from it, because of the things I gain from it. But when you come from a different faith background, sometimes there's parts you miss or you lose. Did you have any of those struggles? Like, did you feel like you were betraying your family or your culture, or were there any conflict in your home with your family because of your choices?
I think I did feel a sense of loss, like I'm, or maybe not loss, but like betrayal. Like I'm betraying my culture because I'm no longer Buddhist. But at the same time, it's like, okay, what was I doing that showed others that I was Buddhist? It wasn't like you could tell, It's not like something that I wore or that I professed in any other way. It was just the way that I lived my life. But then it was kind of hard to tell. I couldn't tell someone like, oh yeah, I'm Buddhist and this is why. Like I didn't understand. I didn't have a concrete answer to give anybody because it wasn't something that I fully believed. It was just something that was passed on, and I was like, oh, I'm supposed to be like this because my parents taught me, so I must have to be like this. But then when I was, a mom myself and like searching and looking for a relationship and trying to understand my place, trying to understand life, trying to understand why things happen, and all these questions about life in general. Like when I looked to Jesus, I found answers that he was able to provide that I couldn't find in anything else that I was, looking at in Buddhism. Because in Buddhism, I felt like I didn't have a good understanding of what that religion was in general. I just said, oh, I'm Buddhist, and that was it. But I didn't really understand what it meant. But with Christianity, I really had a better knowledge of, okay, this is what it means. This is how we're supposed to live, and this is what we believe, and these are the values. And so I just felt like it was a decision that I made, knowing and understanding what it encompassed.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
No, that makes sense, and that's what I was going to ask, because my story, I'm that's not mine. I have the faith that I was raised with, and I know a lot of people that's their story, and so I think that sometimes people will go out there and they're evangelizing or proselytizing or sharing their faith, whatever their faith may be, and I think that it's good to have a sense of understanding and respect for what it feels like to leave behind a faith, but also what it might feel like, because it's like, I didn't really have it necessarily to begin with. It was just passed on to me. And just recognizing and understanding and being respectful of that entire process and what that feels like. So, all right, switching gears a little bit. You mentioned about your husband, Robert. We haven't talked about you as a wife, but you and Robert have known each other for a long time. Like, how old were you guys when you first met?
He was 16 and I was 17.
Okay,
So
that's
time.
that's a few decades. Yeah, actually, it's a few decades.
Yeah.
We're old enough now. I can say that, a few decades. Wow,
Yeah.
we are getting old, Christy. Okay,
Yes, yes.
but so you were somebody then who can say that you are married to your high school sweetheart, right?
Yeah.
So what does that mean for you? What is that like for you to be that person who's like, yeah, I'm married to the guy I was with when I was a teenager. We were dating in high school. Like, what is that like? Do people look at you funny? Do people look down on you, make fun of you, or idolize you? What's that experience like for you?
So my sister, she told me one time, like, she's like, man, you're like a Lifetime movie, where the girl meets the boy when they're like in high school, then they meet each other again, and then they get married, like happily ever after kind of thing. But actually, it's kind of neat though that I met him when I did, because of the situation where it was like a long distance relationship for so many years, that it really helped us to get to know each other. Because back then, like, we were writing letters, and then we got to, emailing each other, and then we got to like actually making phone calls and cell phone calls. So, I mean, you really get to know a person when you're writing letters, because you're waiting for the person to respond. So that shows patience, that shows dedication, that shows commitment, that you didn't just, oh, well, he didn't respond back in, 2 seconds, so I'm no longer talking to this guy. It's like me waiting for snail mail to come. So yeah.
Yeah, and how much is that? How much is that shaped your life? I mean, so there are people who would look down on that and say, "Kamar, how dare you limit this woman to being defined as a wife?" And like I said, we talked about all these other things up until this point in time. So if that's what you're thinking, listening to this, go back and listen to the last episode, because that's not who Christy is. But it is a part of your life. Like, so what part of being his wife? What does that mean for you? What does that do in your life?
So I feel like there's certain things, like, when you're in a relationship, you can either grow apart or you can grow together. So I'm very fortunate to be able to look back in our life and see how we have grown together. I feel like it's easy for me to say, oh, one person can lose themselves and then like grow with the person. But I feel like he has been able to thrive and grow as a person individually on his own, and me, myself as well. But we've kind of like grown in the same direction. And I think that's important for our marriage to work, like to be able to grow together towards the same direction, but also be individual, like him as an individual and then me as an individual.
Yeah, no, that's good. Yeah.
Yeah, I think especially like because we met so young, it's very easy for one person to say, okay, I'm just going to move to where you are and go to the same school as you. And then, that sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't work out when one person gives up everything to move closer to one person. But I think because he went to his college in Michigan and I went to my college in California, that we were able to grow as a person ourselves, knowing who we are, trying to figure out who we are. Then when we came together, it was better for our relationship because we were able to continue to grow, but to grow together in a direction that we both wanted for ourselves as well as for us as a couple.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and also speaking of you guys with the idea of you growing and growing together, but also being individuals, something else that is a factor or at least a feature of your marriage. So you guys, it is a biracial marriage. You know, Robert is black, and you are. What do we say? You are an American. How did you say it? You said an American who is of Chinese ethnicity, but American culture. Is that how you said it? Okay, there we go. So, but still, there is that difference, and I can recall. I remember one time when we were still living out there, you had shared with Laura, my wife. You had shared with her about how you were out somewhere and how people would look at you as though you were the nanny of your own children, because of their skin color versus your skin color.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think I remember like I was at Home Depot, and then like I was speaking because I speak to my children in Chinese. So then when they were younger, and so we would be out, and then I would speak to them or reprimand them in Chinese, and they're like, "Oh wow, how much do you charge?" And I'm like, "What do you mean? How much do I charge?" I guess they were like thinking because I don't look like them that I was the nanny, and that I must charge extra because I'm teaching them a second language, which is kind of funny. But yeah.
But aside from that, just the cultural pressures of people who are just, I guess, for lack of a better word, ignorant. What is that? How has that affected your relationship? Are there any tensions or difficulties or problems you have in your home because of different cultures and different ethnic identities, as it were?
I think there's like little subtle nuances that some things like in the Asian culture that I carry over, and I'm like, how come you don't do it this way? I thought that that's how you're supposed to do it all the time. Like an example would be like, honoring your parents is like a big thing, like a big thing in the Asian culture. Mm-hmm. And like, even as an adult, like, I'm afraid of my dad, and like I'm afraid of his disapproval. I'm afraid of like, just being a disappointment to him. And I mean, I'm a full grown adult, like I don't depend on him on anything for financial, help or anything like that. But even so, like he's my dad. And so, I see how like when I speak to my dad, there's always this sense of like respect. Like I won't talk back to my dad. Like I won't make a sarcastic remark to him because I just can't. He's my dad. I'm not supposed to. I'm the child. But I know, I've seen in other cultures where, when you're a grown adult and, some kids or some adult kids will speak back to their parents and treat them like a peer, not necessarily as their parent still. So to me, that's like something that it's different because, so for me, like to see your parents and to be like, hi, George, hi, Carolyn, like that's just weird. Yeah. Like it's just really weird. Like they will always be Mr. George and Miss Carolyn, and I will always like address them with respect and treat them with respect. And like, yeah, I can joke with them, but it's always like, oh, you're the parent and I'm the kid, kind of like.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I've had to grow and learn that too with my wife's parents, and I've had to accept calling them by their first names, because what I've had to understand is that it is a cultural difference, and for them within their cultural context, for me to act awkward and not just call them by their first names is to not treat them like my parents, because that is the expectation of their adult children. And so one of the ways that I showed them that I have embraced them as my parents, yes, by marriage, but still I think of them as my parents as well. I mean, Laura and I, we've been together 22 years, so they've been my parents for 22 years, that part of me showing that as an adult was to call them by their first name in a loving, respectful tone. It's not like I'm saying it, like they're trash or anything. There's still a way of saying their name, but that is a sign that, that I do love them, which has been weird for me. I've gotten used to it now. I've grown to get used to it. But it doesn't change the fact of how I talk to my parents. No, they're still mom and dad. like I don't call them by their names. That's for sure. Yeah. So okay. So we talked about these this more specific things to you. I want to talk a little bit about some other general things. Right now in the world, there's a bigger understanding in this part of the world of something that we'd already seen before in California for a couple of decades now, of the issues of gender and gender politics and gender identity and all those things. And so you identify as a woman. I know that sounds weird to say, but it's just people can't see you. And hopefully people are listening and they don't actually know you, Christie. So you identify as a woman. What does it mean to you to be a woman?
To be a woman. Well, I'm going to go off of what the Bible how the Bible defines a woman. Okay. And so yeah. I don't want to. I don't know. I feel like this is such like a hot topic for some people because they will get offended. You know.
Don't feel bad. This is one of the things that I do. Like people who might get offended, that's okay. I live with it. You don't. The people who might get offended, they'll come at me. They won't come at you. Okay, it's all right.
Right. Well, I mean, oh, so I'm thinking like, okay, so biologically, a woman is a person who has a womb, who can carry life,
Mm-hmm.
who can birth a being. So to me, that is a woman. But also, a woman is someone who is a helpmate to a man, her husband. And she is created to be nurturing, to be able to love on and support her children as well as her husband. So to me, that is what a woman is.
All right. Now, and I'm glad that you gave that definition because there were when we first got here to Kentucky, my wife was still a stay-at-home mom, and I had to deal with some of my employees who worked for me at the time, who actually looked down on me and my wife because our choice was for my wife to be a stay-at-home mom. That was not forced on her, just like it's not forced on you. It's a choice. What do you say to people who look at your definition and look at your lifestyle choices, as it were, and they look down on you and say that you're trapped, you're enslaved, you're persecuted? What do you say to them?
So this is a choice. I could be working because I did work before I had kids, but it is a choice that my husband and I made together that is best for our family. Because I mean, we could have easily sent my kids to daycare, and then they would have been fine, and I could have continued teaching, and I would have been fine, and we would have been a dual income family, probably with more money. But it goes back to the relationships. Now, will my kids look back and say, "Oh yeah, I remember mom, but she was always working." Or will they remember, oh yeah, I remember mom, she was like, oh, always like running around with me, going to the park, making sure, we had all these items for, the play, the performances and whatnot. I always want them to remember me and my husband being a part of their childhood. Like I remember, what was it? There's like one time when the girls, they were part of like a fashion show, and we had to make a dress together out of flowers and stuff, and like I had to sew something, and sewing is not my forte, and I had to hand sew this thing, and so it's like an experience that I know my daughter Mia will remember forever because we did it together. We poked our fingers with those needles, and yeah, we did it. We suffered through it together, and I want them to remember that time, that moment, those memories to live on even after I'm gone. And so the choice for me to stay home is because I want to make sure I have a relationship with my children, that they can feel safe around me, and that they can, continue to hold on to even when I'm gone. So for for anyone else, this decision that we made for our family might not work for them, and that's okay. I'm not going to say you have to stay at home because, you're going to regret not being able to spend all this time with your kids. I mean, maybe for some people, being with their kids all the time, that just, scares them. So they don't want to do that, and that's fine. I mean, but this is something that I willingly choose to do, and that it works for our family, and that my husband, he's okay with that decision too. And we're blessed enough that, that I can stay at home with them. Yeah. And so, I mean, this is where God is leading us, and this is where he has blessed us in so many ways, because we can't have one parent stay at home with the children. So, I mean, I kind of want to say, you do you and I do me. I mean,
yeah, and it's funny as you were saying that, and as you've been saying these last couple of just your understanding of the roles you carry, the names you carry. I was going back to in my mind to why you chose the name Christie, and I was just thinking about how you really are embodying this idea of, look, I have a sort of person I'm going to be, and I'm choosing to be this kind of person. And I think that's something about you that that a lot of times people will look at you and again and they'll say, okay, and I'm not saying this, you know me well enough, I'm not saying this negatively in myself, but these are the stereotypes that you are faced with as an Asian woman who is a stay-at-home mom, who is married to the guy you've been with since you were a teenager. They're going to look at you and put you in such a small box of a particular kind of person who must be, you must be some kind of subjugated, some kind of kept under some rule. And it's like, no, you must not know Christie, because that's not her at all. She is who she chooses to be.
Yes. Yep. And with all these like titles and names and things that we carry, people might have these preconceived notions of what I should be like and what people should be like. Like you said, Asian, stay-home mom. But I mean, I pray that it's in those relationships that I have with people that they discover who I really am. Like a title is a title, but it doesn't have to define you if it's like based on assumptions. Like I want people to be intentional in getting to know a person, who they are fully before categorizing, pigeonholing them into whatever they think they should be like. So yeah, it goes back to that relationship.
Yeah. Well, and I was just wondering, because I know we mentioned something last episode a little bit, but are there any other times or any other names that you feel like people have called you that you don't like or that you don't appreciate them thinking of you as? Just again, not necessarily easy to say names, but just impressions of you or ideas of you that you're like, you know what, that's not me. Like, are there any other ones we haven't talked about that you've experienced?
Not that I can think of, because I mean, most of the names that I've been called, like, especially like as a teacher, you're like, Miss Taylor, Miss Vong, all those, it's kind of like, so when I taught in LA, I was Miss Vong. I started off as Miss Vong. And so when the parents came and they saw who I was, they're like, oh yeah, those kids, they're going to drive her crazy, because they didn't think I would be able to handle the kids. They didn't think that I was going to be firm enough to put my foot down and to teach them and to have them under control. But it was like, over the years, I kind of earned the parents' respect, and I pray I earned their favor and their love, because I felt like before I left that field, like I really had good rapport with the children, my students, and then also with the parents. Like I was able to prove to them, like, yeah, yes, I'm Miss Vong, but I also am a pretty good teacher. I like to think, and that I'm serious and passionate about teaching their children. I'm not just going to be a pushover. I'm not just going to be a body that's there just to say, oh, there's an adult in the room, but I'm really there for their children. So I mean, I think in the past, I was always nervous about how people would receive me, especially when they don't know who I am and they just read off like, oh, Christie Taylor, where are you? Oh, you're Christie Taylor? I didn't expect you to be Christie Taylor, kind of thing. And it's like, oh, okay, well, I want you to get to know who I am. Because, I mean, in this world, if you look, there's a lot of Christie Taylors, but, there's only one Christie Taylor, me. And so I hope that they would get to know who I am.
Yeah, I will say too, whenever I forget like what your Facebook handle is, because that's not your Facebook name, and I start typing in Christie Taylor and it never finds you, and it's like, oh, that's right, that's not actually how her name is on Facebook. I have to remember that so I can actually find you, because there are a lot of Christie Taylors and none of those are you, and I'm looking for you. One other question I actually have of another possible name. I don't know if you've ever struggle with this name at all, and so I'm curious. I want to know something that I've heard about and encountered in culture and society is this concept of I think they call it a tiger mom, of like that really strict Asian mom who's always just like on top of her kids. Have you ever like struggled with that sense of identity? This idea of am I being an overbearing Asian mom in all the wrong ways?
Yes and no, because I feel like in some aspects I do like expect a lot from my children, like how they perform in school. But at the same time, I'm also pretty lax, because I understand as a teacher, not all kids are going to be able to perform at the same level. All kids have different learning styles. And so I kind of like give in a little in terms of like, I know my kids and I know what they're capable of, but I also want to push them. But I also want to show them grace, because if I'm showing them grace, that it's a learning process, and if I show them patience, that, I can come alongside them and encourage them along the way, then I feel like they will be more likely to perform to their potential than to shut down. If I was to be, really that hard tiger mom, putting them down, always insulting them to make sure, in a way to, push them harder. I mean, because that always backfires. That doesn't really work. So, I don't think I fully embrace that title or that identity as a tiger mom. But there are certain things that I do that I just hold that expectation and I make it known to them and I lecture them like a tiger mom would. But I also stop myself short and remind myself to really show them grace and show them patience.
Yeah. I will say that from what I remember observing and even from what I can gather from a distance now, you've always, to me, externally embodied a nice balance of the strictness and the love. I can tell you that I know that my wife and your other friends out there would sometimes be jealous at the level of chores you can get your kids to do, and like, man, my kids don't clean like that. I don't even clean like that. But at the same time, something else I remember Laura talking about that. We were somewhere with you, and you were saying something to your kids in Chinese, and we don't understand all what you're saying. And I will say, for anybody out there, if you're ever around an Asian mom who is talking to her children in their Asian dialect, if you don't have ears trained to understand Asian dialects, it might sound aggressive and angry, and she might be saying "I love you." And that's something that we learned. We saw that, like, because there'd be times we were talking, we'd be like, why are you like being so mean? You're like, I'm not being mean at all. I was encouraging them. Because our ears are not trained to understand that sort of way of speaking. And so there is that too. Like even when it seemed like you were being tough to them, turned out you weren't at all. It's just we don't understand Asian dialects.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it's that tone. Yeah. The tone.
Yeah, it was always something. So we're getting to the end here, and I have a quote that I want to close with here. Excuse me, I got a cough. There we go. All right, so I have a quote, and it comes from the play The Crucible. I actually am partial to this quote because I did play John Proctor in The Crucible in high school. But at the end of the play, you have this part where if you haven't read the book or seen the play, I'm going to spoil it for you. John dies in the end, and he dies standing up for his name. But he has this speech that was always one of my favorite speeches he gives, and I want to quote it to you before I ask my last question. It says, he's speaking to the tribunal, he's speaking to the people who were judging him, and saying that he just needs to sign this paper to save his life. And he says, because it is my name, because I cannot have another in my life, because I lie and sign myself to lies, because I am not worth the dust on the feet of them that hang, how may I live without my name? I have given you my soul, leave me my name. So my last question for you, Christie, is if you could only have one name, you got just like, I'm going to die for this name, what would that name be?
That's a big question. What would that name be? Oh, I don't even think it would be a name. So it's not even, like any one of my, like, it's not my birth name. It's not my my name today, but the name that I would die would be child of God. That's what sticks out to me. I want to be remembered as a child of God.
Yeah. Why that name?
Because I feel like I want to be remembered, and that I stood up to be like Christ, to love God and to love others, and to show others God's love through my actions, through my words, and to live in a way that that draws others to God. That's what sticks out to me. Wow. I don't know if I answered your question.
No, you did good, and everybody gives it slightly different, and that's why. But don't feel bad. Nobody knows that question's coming. They just know that, and everybody's giving the same one. So everybody, but I think it's a great way to end, and I love your answer, because again, thank you for spending this time. We spent, an hour and a half pretty much all together just talking about you and all these different parts of your life. Some of them more difficult to talk about than others. Some of them, you might not ever even really thought about it before. I don't know, but I appreciate you doing this, because my goal in this is that I want people to see other people. I love knowing people and getting to know people, and I love being your friend and knowing you and your family. I hope to get to see you guys again face to face before too long, because I do miss you all. But my whole point with this project is to just try and bring out some people so that everybody else can just, I don't know, see each other better. I feel like that's something that's really missing right now in the world, is that we don't see each other, we don't hear each other, and our names is a great way for us to really get to know each other better and see each other. Is seeing the names we carry, the names others carry around us, and just in that having a little bit more respect and love for one another. So again, thank you, Christie, for taking out the time to do this with me. I really, really do appreciate it, and you mean a lot to our family, and you mean a lot to me.
Yeah, well, thank you for the opportunity to just talk and share, what I never knew I had in my brain or in my heart, or yeah, it's pretty cool. Yeah. So thank you.
No problem. Thank you. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in this podcast are the speaker's own and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of any institution, organization, or corporation. The material and information presented here is for general information purposes only. All persons who participated did so of their own free will and speak for themselves only, regardless of any personal affiliations they may possess. This podcast has been a production of Salt.Light.Love Ministries. All rights reserved.